and welcome to another SAP Ariba Customer Self-Service video. In this edition, we will review how to set up a catalog level contract in buying and invoicing. This contract will be set up as a non-release contract and will be best served for non-recurring terms. So what would be a typical use case for setting up this kind of contract? This type of contract is well suited for suppliers that service many different customer billing locations. For instance, companies that have a large number of stores, plants, office locations, etc. Another key factor is price fluctuations throughout the year. These price fluctuations could be different for each location and can change numerous times throughout the year. Think of a contract where the items or services are priced based on some fixed fee plus some sort of index. A few examples of spend categories where this type of contract is useful are waste management and recycling, security services, industrial laundry services, etc. So why should you use this type of contract? What are some of the benefits? First, suppliers are able to invoice their customers without having a purchase order. Instead, suppliers can invoice for any line item that is in the catalog related to the contract. Defining contract terms at the catalog level reduces the number of line item terms that are needed to be created in the contract. Since the item terms are maintained in the catalog, frequent pricing changes can be made easily without having to amend the actual contract, especially since these changes could potentially happen on a monthly basis. The updated prices can be changed in the catalog itself and would only require approval of the updated catalog. This also presents an opportunity to shift the responsibility of maintaining the catalog pricing changes to the supplier. Once the suppliers have created a new version of the catalog with updated pricing, it would only need to be reviewed and approved prior to activating the new version. And finally, how do I set up this kind of contract? First thing you need to have is a catalog created with the line items, and then you will also need a non-release contract set up that is linked to this catalog. I'm going to walk through quickly some examples that I'm going to use in a demo, and then we'll get into the system and see how it's done. In our example, we have our supplier, Glacier Ridge, that provides waste management services for Acme Company. The pricing in the contract is made up of multiple elements. The first one is the weight of the trash or waste that is removed. This price is equal to some negotiated fixed price component times some specific index, which also would be negotiated in the contract. And then there's another item for miscellaneous variable fees that could be charged. Each of the locations could have a different fixed price component. The pricing can fluctuate from month to month based on the index, and Glacier Ridge needs to invoice monthly and needs to submit each invoice by location. Based on the cost center, approval rules will route the invoice to the correct Acme Company location GM. And now I'll quickly show some example catalog items and then examples of what the invoices could potentially look like. So in January, we have our catalog loaded that is tied to our contract. We have a line item for our Atlanta location for waste removal at $100 per ton. This price would have been made up of the fixed fee that was negotiated times the index that was used. There's another line item for variable fees. And then our next location, Pittsburgh, has its price per ton and a line item for variable fees as well. When the pricing changes the next month, the catalog would be updated with the new pricing, sent for review and approval, and then published as the new version. And then you can see over here examples of what the invoices would look like. Again, an invoice per location. The pricing from the catalog is defaulted. When the pricing changes the next month that they're invoicing, the price will be updated based on the catalog. And now we'll take a quick look in the system on how these contracts are set up and how they can be used. So now we're in the system and I've created a contract workspace. Next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and add our contract terms document. You can see we have our supplier set up, Glacier Ridge, and we're going to go ahead and click on OK. Now there's a few things that I wanted to point out here that are very important for setting up this type of contract. The first thing we need to do is set this as a catalog level contract. The next thing that we want to do is we want to set this up as a non-release contract. Okay, and we want this to be able to allow suppliers to invoice against this contract. The other important thing here is allow supplier to enter invoice accounting. We want to change this to yes. The reason we want that is we want the supplier to be able to enter the accounting information on the invoice in order to drive the correct approval flow. The rest of this we can leave the same and go on to the pricing terms. Then we can go ahead and add items. And here's where we would be able to choose the catalog that we wanted to tie to this particular contract. So we click on select and choose our catalog. Now I've opened up an existing contract that we're going to use for the rest of the demo. This is the contract we have set up with Glacier Ridge to provide our waste management services. This contract was set up as a catalog level contract. It is a no release contract, and we are allowing suppliers to invoice against this contract. The other field that I mentioned was allow supplier to enter invoice accounting. We have that set to yes. If we move on to the pricing terms, this is where we can see that this contract is tied to this particular catalog. Now there's one thing I want to mention at this point about these catalogs. The items from these catalogs will not be available in buying and invoicing to be purchased from your internal users, right? So if somebody is searching your internal catalog, these items are not going to show up for somebody to requisition against. The way that we set up the contract will only allow the supplier to punch in and invoice against these particular catalog items. Now, I had mentioned before, one of the main reasons that we'd wanted to set this up as a catalog level contract is for the ability to quickly maintain and manage pricing changes. If we had created this as an item level contract and put every line item in the contract, whenever pricing would change, we would actually have to go through an amendment process to update the pricing. By doing this with catalogs, when the pricing has changed, the catalog is updated, the new version of the catalog is published, and the new pricing is automatically available when the supplier invoices against this contract. So that's how you would set up the contract. And at this point, we're going to jump over and act as the supplier and show you how they would invoice against this. Okay, we're logged into the Ariba network as our supplier, Glacier Ridge, and we need to go ahead and send an invoice to Acme Company for the waste management services we have been providing. So let's go over to Create, and we're going to choose Contract Invoice. We need to go ahead and select our customer, and then we'll go ahead and click on Next. And here we are at the invoice screen. You can see the first field that we have here is Contract. So we're going to go ahead and select the contract that we want to tie this invoice to. With Glacier Ridge, select, and we'll go ahead and give this an invoice number and an invoice date. And click on Next. And then to continue, we'll scroll down to the line items section and add items from the catalog. So right now we have just punched into the catalog that is associated with this particular contract. And as a supplier, I can invoice for each of these locations. For this example, I want to go ahead and send the monthly invoice for the Atlanta location at Acme Company. So for the total amount of waste removed, let's say we did 5 tons, add that item, and maybe we had some miscellaneous fees throughout the month of $21.12. Add that item, and we'll go ahead and click on Done. If we go back down, we can see our line items that we've just added, and now we'll go update the accounting information. So we'll select both items, and then we want to change these items. Next to each of our line items, we can click this little button to open and close the details. And you can see here that we need a value for cost center. In this case, I'm going to just choose cost center that I have in this demo realm. For the next line item, I'm going to do the same thing. Choose the cost center, and then we're going to click on done. Click on next. Just take a look really fast. We've got our 2 line items, total, and let's go ahead and submit this invoice. So now the invoice has been submitted back through the network to Acme Company and was routed directly to the general manager for the Atlanta location to approve this invoice. The last thing I want to mention before we log back in as Acme Company is that what we just walked through is how a supplier would manually invoice for these services against this contract. What most likely would happen is the supplier would have an automated process built in order to generate the monthly invoices. So now we'll go back in as Acme Company and take a look at the invoice. I've logged back into buying and invoicing, and I've navigated to the contract. See, we've got our contract here. If I can go and click on invoices and be able to see a list of all the invoices that have been submitted against this contract. And here you can see the invoice that the supplier had just sent. Look down, line items. If we want to see the accounting information, select the items, look at accounting details, and we can see that we've got the cost center information. From an approval standpoint, for this demo realm, it's set up to auto approve. In the real scenario, there would be an approval chain set up based on cost center, and the invoice would have routed directly to the general manager, for instance, for this particular location to approve this invoice. And that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have found this helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to your customer engagement executive or SAP Ariba support.